I guess, considering the fact that I spent the entire weekend playing Minecraft like crazy, the amount of stuff I did end up watching is actually not too bad. First of all, I obviously started watching K-On! Because that was real short right there. And as usual, K-On! Is just a very pleasant, amusing thing to watch. Kind of reminds me a bit of Ozuminga Dio. It's really hard to pin down exactly what's so entertaining about it, but something about it just really is. Yeah, I just can't think why. 3 episodes this time, so I'm guessing what they ended at episode 11. So I think what they're probably planning to do next time is I think it was originally a 12 episode series, and then an extra episode came out, and then another extra episode came out, and AniDB lists those 2 extra episodes as extra episodes, whereas my anime list I think has one of those episodes with the series to make the series 1 episode longer. But I'm guessing that the next K-On! Release is probably another 3 episode release, which has the last episode of what originally aired, the first of those extras that my anime list includes in what's called K-On!, and then probably the third extra, maybe? I'm really hoping that's the case, because anything else would probably be a kind of scummy release, I guess. Not that that will stop me from buying it and talking about it, of course. Let's see. After that, I went on to Dragon Ball Z Kai Part 6, and it was actually pretty entertaining, and that's because it pretty much starts out with the Cell stuff, and with the improved pacing, it's actually really nice that the beginning of that stuff, all the Cell stuff, because it's a lot more like a horror story than a whole lot of other things in Dragon Ball Z. I think. I mean, you could maybe be horrified by a lot of the stuff in there, but that one in particular is nice and horror-ish. Unfortunately, I've realized at this point how many episodes I've watched and the pacing that I had to really see where it ends. And unfortunately, I was really hoping Dragon Ball Z Kai told the story all the way through the Buu saga. And I was realizing they're not leaving much room for the Buu saga. I thought they would have maybe been able to go through the Cell stuff really fast, but I guess they can't. Which kind of worried me because I didn't really enjoy the Cell games back when I first watched it. But that's where Dragon Ball Z Kai appears to end, is after the Cell games. And the thing that's really unfortunate about that is if I wanted somebody to watch all of the Dragon Ball Z storyline, Dragon Ball Z was looking like a really good way to have them watch it at a more reasonable pace. Maybe keep their attention better and not leave them walking away thinking, oh god, it really wasted our time by having 3 episodes of characters charging up and talking before actually fighting, even though the planet was supposed to explode 2 minutes ago. But we don't have that option. It means that if I tried to show it to somebody, I'd probably have to watch all the way through Kai, and then we have to jump into the Dragon Box releases and watch all of Buu Saga from there in the original source, and that's going to be a kind of an alarming change of pace, I think. But I guess there's nothing I can do about it. It is what it is, and that's what I have. Let's see. I also watched Kikaishi Set 2, and it's also similarly hard to say what exactly is so great about it. A lot of it seems like very stereotypical setups, and some things here and there that I don't really agree with, but for the most part, watching it is a very pleasant, refreshing experience, even if it's not obviously this really new concept in the way they're executing or unexpectedly solving this problem or that problem. It's kind of sitting right there in a good, entertaining sweet spot of sorts, where it's obviously not the best thing I've ever seen. And by that I mean, it's not going onto my top lists. It's not overthrowing anything. It's possible though that, well, I don't know, but it's been an enjoyable release, or an enjoyable watch, and it's going in intriguing directions not in a very sudden, unexpected way, but rather in a very slow and carefully planned way. Or at least that's the way I feel. So it's been a very enjoyable watch. I'm looking forward to seeing more of it. Let's see. Now, the series I was in the middle of when I did all the Minecraft stuff was MM, which is actually kind of unfortunate because it's subtitled only, which means that focusing solely on Minecraft, I couldn't watch it at the same time I was playing. I didn't want to go and switch what I was trying to um, watch because I had already started it and I wanted to finish it. Um, Now, I've probably mentioned this before, but I'm not a very big fan of anime that focus on male violence and suffering as a point of comedy, and MM kind of stays in a kind of fine line in a different sort of way than other stuff. Now, for the most part, the fact that the character is being hit and whatever, I actually don't mind as much because he's a super masochist. That's the premise of the series, and for the most part, I think getting your enjoyment that way is just fine. And really, my problem was more in, I guess, even though it set it up that way and did amusing things with it, it still kind of comes from a point of view of you should be finding this funny. It almost reminds me of the idea of hentais where a character gets raped, but because the person who raped them is so good at the process, they come to love them and become their slave. It doesn't feel like it's realistic. And the place where you kind of have to compare this. Now, first of all, it almost felt like the two characters, the two main female characters, were maybe copies of other characters. Um, I'm not entirely sure if that's the case. I would really want to see the timings of them when the original source materials came out to see if there was maybe inspiration from other shows. But the little girl who's the sadistic person who likes to beat up our masochistic person, she seems very Taiga-ish, and maybe that's because the opening of MM is very much like the opening of Toradora, which begins with that character pulling up thigh highs from an undershot where you can't quite see up the skirt, but it's designed to draw attention to the thigh highs and then putting it on, I guess. But if that's the case, then I thought she was actually fairly poor um, Taiga. And Taiga, of course, comes from Toradora. I don't know if I mentioned that title or not, but she doesn't feel as convincing as Taiga did. In the case of Taiga, she got violent with people. She would get violent with anybody, and she had a reputation centered around that, where characters kind of knew she's kind of like a miniature. They called her the palm top tiger because she was small, but she was still really vicious, and she had a reputation. Whereas this character doesn't seem to have much of a reputation. Comes out of nowhere, and I don't really understand any of their motivations for trying to attack him, other than the fact that they're an unstated masochist, or not masochist, sadist, which gets down to the real problem I have with all the violence in this anime, and that's I wouldn't have a problem if they had an understanding relationship where she hurts him and he likes to get hurt, but really she's allowed to just go out there and hurt people, and it just so happens the person she chooses to hurt happens to be a masochist, which seems to be sending wrong kinds of messages. I'm pretty sure even in the BDSM community that they practice things such as safe words, which if anything ever gets too out of control, which I guess in the case of these characters can't get out of control. Oh wait, that could kind of get out of control, but yeah, I don't know. And the other female lead, she could be a potential copy of that girl from Working, the one who's afraid of men and always has to punch them if she touches them or they get too close or whatever. Which seemed very strange. At least in Working, it was a more convincing setup, I thought. Not now. This is not to say that MM is bad. It's just it it probably reminded me too much of those, and I compared it too much to those other two anime. Oh, I call it Working because that's its original Japanese name, and I forgot that here in the U.S. it was released as Wagnaria, I believe. Just so that we are all on the same page, even people who aren't familiar with original Japanese titles for stuff. So, very strange and crazy show. Very hard to tell what all I think about it. Other than it didn't seem as focused as I would have hoped. And it's kind of amusing how watching it, you would almost wonder if there would be more fan service, since they really did play a whole lot of jokes close to that. They didn't actually do any panty shots or whatnot, but they got really close. So if you ever think that while watching that, well, amusingly enough, you have the MM specials, which are 9 shorts that they're like a minute or two long each, and they're pure fan service of the characters. It's I don't know. I didn't know what to think about those. They were kind of they kind of were what they were. Oh well. And then finally, I finished up my anime watching for the week by watching Eden of the East Air Communication. I believe I had mentioned before that I had not noticed that the first Eden of the East movie, its domestic release, the bonus disc has the Air of Communication movie on it. Air of Communication is a 2.5 hour long recap of the first series, so it's about half as many, half the length ish. And it was actually, I was kind of glad I watched it. Now, this one was subtitled only, but Eden of the East has this kind of amusing allure to it, which makes it really easy to pay attention and not feel like you have to pay attention to other stuff. So I didn't feel this big need to continue playing Minecraft while it was on. It was important to watch, and since Air Communication was subtitled only, it was really interesting watching it, and it made me realize that I think the dub for it was actually pretty good. I felt like they actually got a lot of the feeling right for a lot of the characters. I could be mistaken, because right off the bat I can't say one superior over the other, and this includes some very interesting attention to details that you wouldn't know from the dub version, but in the at least in Air Communication, and I assume the original Eden of the East series was the same. Since it starts out in Washington D.C. and the characters are in America, the people they interact with, are Americans, or maybe tourists, but they're not set up as tourists. They're mostly local police folk, and probably people at the airport. Or was that in Japan? That was probably in Japan. So, with the the U.S. dub, the English dub, there we go, you would expect all the characters just all speak English, unless there was some reason they needed to do something else. But they're in the U.S. who speak English, so they speak English, and the main characters are being dubbed into English, so they speak English. Fun. But in the Japanese version, the Americans spoke English and the Japanese spoke Japanese. And the reason that I'm actually going down this route and mentioning it is because I realized that the voices for the English characters were actually really good. I mean, there's so many instances out there where you have an English character in an anime, and I don't know if it's budget or if they try and do it in-house or what, but you notice that something feels off about the English voices in Japanese anime and in their original dub, and that didn't feel like it was the case for Eden of the East. That was quite a shock, and that made it feel worth it to watch for me. And then everything on top of it just made it even better. Eden of the East allure, as I mentioned, and Air Communication is focused on some of the more important details. And coming back and watching it after movies 1 and 2, which kind of referenced things in the previous movies, I suddenly realized via Air Communication just how much they actually revealed throughout the series, little details here and there that I had missed as I was going through, and that actually made it really fun for a good watch through. This may mean Eden of the East would be good for a watch through for people who watched the first two movies and don't want to watch Air Communication, but it made the ending to the second movie slightly more relevant, in my opinion. I think the original criticism still stands, where it kind of gives a relationship blue balls and an unconvincing answer, which is kind of inevitable. I mean, because if a series could come up with the real answer, a convincing answer to the problems that come up in the anime, then it would be something we could implement in real life. But we can't. So we won't. So we don't. And it is. And it. Oh well. Anyways, that's pretty much everything I watched. I mean, I don't feel like talking about the music video version of the Eden of the East opening, since it kind of is what it is, and there's nothing about it to really discuss. But there we go. That's everything I watched, and there was a lot of great things that came up this week. So I'll be really interested in checking those out soon.